Good evening and welcome to the Monday, August 18th, 2014 Lewiston City Council. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next order of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they may wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the city manager. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Do we have any citizens' comments? Name and address for the record, please.
What record? My name's Ken Cron, 438 Crestline Circle Drive. Just wanted to address a few issues with the City Council. The tax increase that's proposed at 4.8%, along with I believe, an increase of 1% in the water rates, and sewer, which I believe if you should probably check the reserves because that money cannot be moved around anymore, if you remember. We should have a large reserve in there right now. A question on the Southway project that's still unfinished, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, the Southway project that was brought up, 5 years ago, was to be from the Southway Bridge down to the tunnel down there by the Southway boat ramp to the Tunnel of Love, or whatever you want to call it. And that was also supposed to include an overlay of asphalt, lighting to that tunnel, grass, sprinklers, and an amphitheater. And any of that is yet to be seen to be done. I don't know. I know it was on the plan. And I don't know if it's because we had to pay an extra $300,000 for excavation or what it might be, but we ask that you check into that. We'll also ask you to hold the line on property taxes. I mean, you can only charge so much. I know some people don't even pay property taxes, and people whose property taxes are inclusive in their house payment don't realize how much property taxes they're paying. But once you get your house paid for and you get that property tax bill, then you realize how much property taxes are. And our property taxes in Lewiston are some of the highest in the state. Our assessed values on our homes are some of the highest in the state. Our water rates, I know, are highest in the state at one time and still are. But we really need to look at that. We ask you as a city council to be good stewards of our money. You were elected to this position, and you know, you have to make tough decisions. And like an old coach said, we ask, hold that line. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens' comments?
Mike Lawrence, 458 Crestline Circle Drive. Oh, last week, Councilman Blakey's comment to the acting fire chief was if he was satisfied with the budget his predecessor had left. And after looking at the increase, I can certainly see why he said yes. It's a $600,000 increase in a budget. God, I guess money grows on trees around here. We need a new SUV so the fire marshals can go around and check weeds in this town. Boy, I mean, they must have way too much time on their hands if, you know, we need to furnish them a new rig to look at weeds. You know, I mean, it is, just like Ken Cron said. They said, you know, you're telling them what to do. You're not just sitting here, you know, having city staff dictate to you. You know, you're supposed to be representing the taxpayers. You know, we got a $242,000 increase in the police budget. Well, I understand they got to replace their cars because they actually use those vehicles. And, you know, getting back to the cell phone issue, You know, Councilman Collins, you know, he plea about, you know, well, we should stick with, you know, Inland City. Well, I've been with them for 15-plus years or better, and they are good. But, you know, but I got some public records requests, and in January, we were paying $54,498 for cell phones a year. And now, as of August, it's over $60,000. We got 138 employees in that neighborhood that have cell phones. Well, I don't believe for 1 minute that all these people need cell phones, and you can bet that probably the vast majority of it, probably 90% or better, is, you know, they're using it for their own personal use. And it's not like, you know, there's no city code says we owe them a cell phone. And it's just like this car allowance and stuff. You think these people are going to quit their jobs if you guys make a tough decision and take it away? I hardly think so. You know, I don't have a problem giving them a stipend, but I think it's up to you to go through and see which one of these people actually needs cell phones and not just go nilly-willy. And, you know, and it's in a Inland Sailor doesn't get the contract and they have some people, well, life's tough, you know, it ain't fair. You know, I've seen ATK and St. Joe's and, you know, Potlatch. They've all laid off people over the years, and a lot more than one or two, you know. And I didn't see anybody out there, you know, crying because, you know, these people got laid off. Yeah, it's a lousy deal when people get laid off, but, you know, I've never seen the city, you know, doing anything, you know, as such as that. I mean, it's just business. It's just how things shake out. And then I guess as far as this property tax increase, I mean, I listened to this dollar increase. That's the biggest bunch of baloney I ever heard. You guys must dream this stuff up. And I said, and notice when they say this, it's never about apartment housing or anything else, because houses certainly aren't on that circuit breaker. Or what about businesses? You know, how big a hit are some of these businesses going to take? 4.8%? I would think some of them are probably going to take a pretty good. You get like somebody, Joe Hawley, got 9 acres out there. And sure, they're the same rate as us, but you look at what some of these business owns, it you know, kind of adds up to a pretty good chunk of change. And, you know, we got, my favorite, you know, another $300,000 in the library that never passed the mustard. I feel like if you're going to put any more money in that thing, then it should be voted on, not just a blank check and away we go with that deal. But anyway, all I can say is, I hope you people actually do your homework and, you know, study this thing, because it is. I mean, it's, you know, money ain't growing on trees out there, and just to think that, you know, we just pass this stuff without looking at this budget and seeing what's in there. I mean, I find that a little hard to swallow, a $600,000 increase. I mean, so anyway, I guess it's up to you to take care of business, and you know, you were elected by the taxpayers, and that's who you're supposed to be representing, you know, not city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens' comments?
My name is Scott Funk. I live at 510 25th Avenue here in Lewiston. I just want to thank you guys for the farsightedness that the council has shown in the years in the past in supporting the library. As you well know, the library is what can I say, a great success. With the new library and what we've used the new library for, there have been more people that have attended our library each month than showed up in electing all of you at the last election. 75% of the people in this valley now own or have library cards, which is a giant jump forward. As you probably know, because many of you have come to our library is more than just books and checking in and out books. Don't make the mistake when you plan for the future to use the just good enough strategy, or it's something that my kids did, or it's something that I had, so that's good enough for the future. Invest wisely as you have in the past. The money that you've spent in the past in our library has been given back to our city and has been used by our city. The people in this valley have voted many times with their feet going into our library. Over 16,000 people attend that library each month. It is one of the best used resources in the valley. As a library board member, I would encourage you to continue to fund the library in the budget that you have and to think about us for the next year. We will have for you in the next year a strategic plan for what we plan to do with the second floor. As a father of 2 sons, I appreciate the city's funding of the library and the amount of education and programs that my children enjoyed as they grew up in this valley. As an educator for Lewiston High School, I wholly support the library as something that has provided great resources not only for my students, but for all the students in this valley. I thank you for the farsightedness that you've used in providing better transportation systems in this valley with the roundabout or the tunnel of love, as it's been so aptly described in the past. I've used that with my wife numerous times when walking down to the levee, and it is wonderful that we do not have to dodge cars anymore when trying to get across. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the active agenda. First on the active agenda is Resolution 2014-45, approving a lease between the city as a lessor and the First Territorial Capital of Idaho Revitalization Project, Inc. as lessee. I'd entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2014-45.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. 6-0. My apologies.
Approving Resolution 2014-45 by title only. A resolution approving a lease between the City of Lewiston as lessor and the First Territorial Capital of Idaho Revitalization Project, Incorporated, and Idaho Corporation as lessee, authorizing and directing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest respectively said lease and providing an effective date.
Now that the motion's been read, I'd entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2014-45.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next on the active agenda is approving the reason statement for AP 0213, appeal of Benning and Lean. I'd entertain a motion to approve the reason statement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I can again point out, this will be a substitute statement of what your decision was regarding this particular development. I hope you have all had a chance to look at it, look at the transcript, but I need to know in the form of in your motion and when you vote is if what is contained in this statement adequately and accurately reflects what you base your decision on in denying the appeal and approving the conditional use permit.
Mr. Pro Tem.
Councilor Randall.
As before, I'm going to have to vote no on this because I disagreed with the reason statement before concerning the acreage for one, the density for another, and and also the fact that they didn't use the recommended density that was in the comprehensive plan. So again, I'll have to vote no on this.
Councilor Daniel.
As I had mentioned before, my decision was based on the, as it's actually mentioned on page 7, the very last paragraph. My decision was based on the findings forwarded to us from the Planning and Zoning Commission, the testimony taken at the appellate hearing, and information provided by staff.
Is there any other discussion?
Do you need something from every one of us?
You know, as long as when you vote for, you agree that it is in fact reflects what you, the information that you took into consideration and the reason that you made your decision, and if that's why you're voting yes, and that's all I need to know. And if you would agree to that, it would be very helpful to me.
All those in favor of approving the reason statement per the statement that Councilor Daniel just stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Ordinance 4613, a second reading, amending Ordinance 4600, the annual appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2013, and ending September 30th, 2014, appropriating additional monies that are to be received by the city in the sum of $7,357,180. Mr. Bennett?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. This is the second reading of the amended budget ordinance, which we discussed and introduced at the last meeting, which shows the additional revenues and expenditures that came through the city's books last year based on unanticipated revenues, such as grants, for example, and then those funds were in turn expended. This ordinance amendment here will balance the books, so to speak, on the budget for this current year.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to approve Ordinance 4613 for the second time.
So moved.
I'm sorry, read for the second time.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving Ordinance 4613, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Approving the second reading of Ordinance 4613 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston, Idaho, amending Ordinance Number 4600, the annual appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2013, and ending September 30th, 2014, appropriating additional monies that are to be received by the City of Lewiston, Idaho, in the sum of $7,357,180, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to approve Ordinance 4612 for the second time. Or, I'm sorry.
Read.
It's already been read, so never mind. I'd entertain a motion, or I'm sorry, moving on to the next item on the agenda, Ordinance 4612, the second reading, to be termed the annual appropriation ordinance, appropriating sums of money authorized by law and deemed necessary for all general and special municipal purposes of the city for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2014, and ending September 30th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
A motion's been moved and seconded to approve Ordinance 4612, the second reading of the budget for the second time. Any discussion? Counselor Daniel.
I'll be making some amendments at the third reading, but in the absence of Mayor Kleberg, I'd rather hold on to those amendments until then.
Counselor Randall.
I'm of the same deal. There's some amendments I would like to make on the proposed budget, and I'd rather wait until the mayor is available.
Pro Tem,
Counselor Blakey.
I'm in agreement. I have recommendations that I would like to hold to the third reading too, at the same time, when we all will be here.
Now, at the last meeting, the mayor said that the 4.8% wasn't going to be the final number. So I realize we're talking about waiting until the last and final reading of the budget. But is there any discussion on how we're going to come down from that 4.8%? Counselor Randall.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, one of the ones that concerns me is the library money, proposing $250,000 for a capital improvement budget for the second floor. And I don't think that's appropriate at this time. And also, my understanding is the library fund has got about $1 million available. So that should be taken in consideration, that the city should necessarily come up with the money to do this project.
Okay. I've got a couple questions for staff. Mr. Bennett, on page 45, under wastewater at the bottom of the Citizen's Guide to the Budget, it says purchased a used track hoe for $80,000. What will that be used for?
The track hoe is used in the construction of projects for the wastewater departments, such as the replacement or maintenance or repair of lines when they need to go in and open up the street to prepare the area for a replacement project or a maintenance project of one kind or another. You'll note that is a used vehicle because it is a good value, and that's what it will be used for. I'd like to make just one note about the library budget, just to make sure it's clear. The money that's proposed for the library budget this year, it is split between donations from the Library Foundation that the city has received and is holding in its accounts, and capital reserve funds that are already in the city's budget. There are library reserve funds for that specific purpose, which is for capital improvements to the library. It does not involve any additional general fund dollars. Although the point about the library is taken, it will not have any effect on the balancing of the general fund budget this year.
Point of a clarification on that. From the council perspective, we could still transfer the capital monies to the general fund, is that correct?
No, because of the initiative that Mr. Cron just talked about when he was up here. We cannot transfer between funds any longer.
Okay. So back to the Traco, you said it's used, $80,000. So do we already have that lined up, which one we're going to buy?
No, but we have an idea of what the market's like out there as far as looking for available used vehicles. We have a record, if you will, of available units, and we go looking for those. It could be in Spokane, it could be in Coeur d'Alene, it could even be in Boise, but it will be, those are the dollars that are available because we reasonably expect that there will be a vehicle like that available for us, rather than having to go out and purchase a brand-new vehicle.
So it could be more or less than the 80,000 that's allocated.
That's our estimate based on the year and the type of vehicle that we are looking for, yes. But it could be less, it could be more.
Okay. Councilor Blake.
Unless you're not done.
I still have some other
Keep
questions
going.
here. For Mr. Bennett or Mr. Marsh, where does it show in the Citizens Guide to the Budget here how much each employee gets for a car allowance? Is that reflected in here somewhere?
No, and the only employees that receive a car allowance are the department managers. They all receive the same amount. It's a $200 a month car allowance amount, and it's not reflected in the Citizens Guide, but that amounts to 7 or so employees.
And the two chiefs, for the convenience of the city, have take-home vehicles, but that's separate.
Right, okay. So as a matter, Mr. Marsh was informing me, the chief of police and the fire chief, of course, have vehicles that they take home with them because they're on call 24/7, so that in case they need to leave to a particular incident site to take over an incident command, they've got that vehicle there that they use.
What kind of impact would we have if we were to phase that out over the next 2 years?
Impact? Well, it's anything that the council could do. If you prefer not to have that, we can phase that out.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Blakey.
Actually, I want to dovetail on two questions that have been asked already, and one is what Pro Tem has already brought up. If we were to phase out or eliminate the $200 stipend for the, how many department heads again? Help me here.
There's 6.
Six
department
or
heads?
so.
6 vehicles? 6 department heads. If we were to phase it out, we would have to replace it with something, wouldn't we? I mean, then we
Well,
would
that's up
just...
to the council.
Well, correct, but we wouldn't expect, or we could expect, the individuals to drive their own private vehicle to and from all events, but would they not then submit mileage?
Yeah, they would, and one of the reasons that the car allowance came up with the first time is because the council at the time and over time has not wanted to add to the base salaries of employees. So rather than do that, since that's what would happen by adding it into salary. It was treated as a separate item. Now, it's still taxable, just like regular income would be.
It's taxable income.
But it was in order to not put that dollar amount into the base salary budget.
So I know this may sound like I'm getting nitpicky here. Does once in a while, do we ever kind of take a look at how much mileage we're actually talking about? And from the standpoint, is it cheaper to just reimburse $200 a month versus the actual mileage on an average amount? I know it varies from month to month, week to week. Has that ever been looked at periodically?
I am not aware that it has been done. It may have been done at one time when they first initially were looking at whether or not it would make more sense to do a car allowance than to put it into salary because of the expenditures from using mileage as an indicator. Because right now the IRS rate is about 55 cents, 56 cents a mile.
Yeah, so my firm
Right.
reimbursed me at that amount when I have to drive to far places. One further question, please. Since our first reading of last Monday, in talking to you privately, you have found some further cuts in the budget. You found some areas that you've gone back and massaged the budget and found some additional cuts. Between now and next Monday, possibly these questions for Dan, do you feel there may be some further tightening up of the budget between now and then, and other line items that you want to look at but haven't had time to look at yet?
Well, I would say that the budget that's presented to you is the budget that the staff has recommended be adopted this year. Now, of course, always based upon comments that we receive from council, we're looking to adjust that as needed in order to address the concerns that are voiced by the council. So, when I say we look back on issues like, have we double counted items? Have we put items in the budget that have already been paid for, or have there been errors in the budget or anything like that would come up with additional dollars that would reduce the amount of the property tax levy or allocation, for example. And we are doing that, and we are doing that on an ongoing basis. But until we know a little bit more specifically from the council members, what areas you are looking at or what other kinds of results you'd like to see as far as what the property tax allocation ends up being, we'll have a number of options that we could look at. So we'll have that information available. And since, as I see, the majority of the council has decided that they would prefer to have that discussion next week when the mayor is here, we'll be prepared to address that.
I'm interested in finding out some more specifics about what you were just talking about, the things that have been double counted and paid for already. Several months ago, I had asked for contingency plans for each of the department heads to go back and look at a 3% reduction in each of their departments. At the time, council didn't have consent to give that direction to the city manager, but I'm wondering if, is there anything that coincides with that?
They're kind of really two different issues. We're talking about things like the new server for the Spillman system having already been accounted for in the budget, and we had budgeted for it twice, about $30,000. We're not talking about large ticket items. We're talking about a variety of small things that we've come across that add up to, about, I'm thinking right now it's about $88,000, something like that, which is about 0.5% on the budget as far as the property tax allocation goes. So those are the kinds of things that we look for and have found that could allow us to look at a reduction in the property tax allocation.
When would we be able to see an itemized list of that $88,000 number?
Well, I can get it to you between now and next week, or I can provide it to you at the meeting so you can look at it there at the meeting and talk about it publicly. But there'll be, I assume there would be more than that to talk about at that meeting as well.
I'd kind of prefer to have it in advance if you already have it now.
I can certainly send you what I have.
Okay,
Not a
thank you.
problem.
Counselor Daniel.
Mr. Bennett, back to the track hoe, what do we currently use?
We have a backhoe.
Okay.
But like many of our vehicles that go through the fleet inventory replacement process, they accumulate so many miles. The engine's been torn down and rebuilt so many times, and eventually it gets to the point where it's more economical and makes more sense for the long run to purchase a new or a replacement vehicle. But we have a vehicle that we have been using.
Are we going to keep that vehicle if we got this track hoe, or are we going to sell it to try to recoup some of the costs? What's the...
Oh, that's a good question. I'm glad that we didn't sell our mowers because we had a problem with the mowers, as you remember, and we ended up having to get those back so that we could reuse them for a while until we could get the new mower replacements in. But generally, the answer would be yes. We would be looking to try and sell that vehicle to recover some of the cost of purchasing or replacing a new vehicle.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Counselor Randall.
Dan, would you explain to us why we're looking at an additional $500,000 on the Health Trust Fund?
Let me turn to that page, and I believe we're up, Mr. Mayor, Pro
Yes,
Tem,
sir.
Counselor. It's like 430,000, I believe, Counselor. A little background. The city's health insurance fund is similar to our workers' comp fund. We're self-insured, so we pay ourselves premiums, with the exception of a stop loss. So it's for catastrophic claims beyond $60,000 we insure. Anything less than that, the city pays the claim itself. But with that, we have fixed costs for third-party administrators, adjudication, some training, that sort of thing. And of course, then the premium on the insurance for over $60,000. So the long and the short of that is we are projecting a 5% increase this next year. And in addition to that, with changes of the Obamacare, we may have to, in all likelihood, pick up a handful of part-time workers, whereas before they were under the 30-hour-a-week threshold. And primarily I'm referring to firefighters. Right now it looks like we have 6 firefighter reserves that we will most likely need to capture and pay their premiums next year. And that alone will push about $100,000. The other thing I wanted to mention is we had a spike in claims this year where we had approximately 8 claims over that stop loss. We are being reimbursed for those. So what that does is reimbursements on one side of the ledger, but then expenses on the other. I really think the net will be somewhere with the 5% increase and maybe a 3% for new employees, maybe 7 to 8%. However, what we are charging back to the other funds, meaning library, police, fire, is a flat 5%. That's what's worked into the budget. A little more history maybe than you wanted, but I felt like I needed to start there.
That's fine. Chief? How many reserve firefighters do we have?
Currently, we have Currently, we have 15 that are active at this point in time.
Okay. So you're talking, Dan, we're going to do about half of these folks are going to be under the Obamacare?
Yes, and the reason the hours, of course, are filling in for vacations and sick
Right.
time and that sort of thing. But yeah,
Right.
5 to 6 is what we project at this point in time of the
Okay.
15.
Is there, well, we need to look at a way of spreading that out so we don't have to pay that medical expense, I think.
I think our new perspective chief has a couple ideas, so for another day, yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Definitely
thank
something
you.
we can talk about.
Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I ask a question too?
Counselor Blakey, go ahead.
Of the chief? Quick question, I know I asked this last week, but I just want to make sure I'm clear in my own mind. On the extractors,
Yes,
and the cost of the extractors, that is for 2 stations and not 3 stations, is that correct?
that is correct.
And Station 3 is on hold because the possibility of a new building somewhere down the road?
That is correct. Yep.
Because if I remember right, in the springtime, that number was a bigger number.
It was. When we went out and actually we applied for a Fire Act grant, we actually have applied 5 years in a row for that. We have been turned down all 5 years for that. We've gotten prices for it. It's around $147,000 to equip all of our stations in the city of Lewiston with that. So with the money that's allocated currently in the budget would take care of 2 of those stations, earmarking the airport station to determine if we were to get a new station, then that would be built into the station itself.
Let me ask I'd like to ask a follow-on question. I took some time and walked through Station 1 here just a few weeks ago. Was wandering through, and because I don't know what extraction systems look like, and I look up and I see something that looks like an extraction system, at least big filter that goes somewhere. Are there existing systems in there now that can be upgraded, can be used, aren't being used, in your opinion? Are there existing systems in there at all?
I'd be happy to answer that. There are some existing systems. They do not remove the exhaust that is produced from the vehicles. The systems we're looking for are actually systems that attach to the vehicle as they're pulling out, so it captures all of it. And that's one of the things we're leading into is you can go through the stations, and if you look, you can see the soot on the walls, and that's because the current systems, it wasn't designed for what it's being intended for. It was kind of a stopgap. It was better than nothing, but what we're seeing is the exhaust that's going into our firefighters' lungs, into our living quarters, and into our gear is now going to pose a safety and health issue to the firefighters and any public that comes in the station.
Councilor Randall.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Would that have anything to do with complying with OSHA?
There are some standards associated with NFPA and stuff on extractors and having separation doors, and with the extractors may eliminate some possibility of having to do some additional construction to the stations with additional separation doors that could get spendy, and this may be able to eliminate some of that also.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question for you, too, on the inspection SUV that
Absolutely.
we talked about last time. Are there any other vehicles that we have that could be used for that purpose?
Currently, at this time, we do not have. The 3 inspector-type vehicles are all used patrol cars. They were probably excess of close to 100,000 miles when they came into our fleet, and they've been into our fleet for many, many years. And the problem is the inspectors' roles of fire investigation and doing all their normal inspections for building code stuff have allowed a lot of additional equipment they have to pack with them. Currently, we've had to put a stopgap with a cage to even try to make them a little bit safe, because if they were in an accident, we have no way of securing any of that equipment. And so all of their gear, this fire gear that when they're going into an inspection, because obviously they're going into a fire environment, those turnouts are currently sitting in the backseat area where they're breathing the same thing that the firefighters are. And so having the SUV would allow us to have that separation. We could control and pack the necessary equipment that they need to truly effectively do their job in fire investigations and inspections.
Is there any other comparable used vehicle that we could purchase instead? Does it have to be a brand-new $35,000 truck?
You know, at this point, I'm unaware of if there's something from the police department that would be in there. Like I said, this was one of those things that was placed into the budget prior to my arrival. We can easily look and see with fleet if there is something. Once again, we get into it's going to be a vehicle that's going to be well over 100,000 miles, and the inspectors, because of their duties, put a lot of miles on day to day because they're going from all the different building sites and then doing their follow-up inspections. They're going to put a lot of wear and tear on those existing vehicles that we may receive that are already probably well close to 100,000 miles.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Blakey.
My question's for Jamie, City Attorney. Pertaining to the part-time attorney.
Full-time attorney?
Full-time. Are we looking to hire full-time or part-time?
Yes.
Which? Both?
Full-time.
Just one.
Full-time, right now. If we did not fund that right now, again, I've heard your comments before in a group, but I'd like to hear them again publicly, what that would do to your department if we did not fund that position.
I have the only department that hasn't grown in employees in over 40 years. The number of employees the city has hired has continued to grow, and my work in terms of my department grows exponentially with that. Every department runs all of their contracts, all of their bids, legal documents, deeds, everything goes through my department. I have one civil attorney, that's me, and one criminal attorney, and those are both, we're both very much overworked just with the amount of work to do. I mean, you can ask any other department head, and they'll tell you that I'm behind almost all the time in trying to get their work done for them, just simply because it's a lot of work to do. So that would allow me to split that person's time between criminal and civil and give us some backup so that if one person wants to go on vacation, the other person can handle a civil or a criminal caseload. We've had 2 attorneys in that office since the 1970s, and the number of city employees and the amount of work that was going on in the 1970s is nowhere near what we do now.
And how do we compare to some other cities our size? Are we lean and mean?
There are, in cities like much smaller than this, like for instance Moscow, they have 2 attorneys. So in cities our size, there's probably 4 or 5 attorneys, but I can get that information for you if you'd like.
It was a random question, just want to know where we were.
Yeah, it just has simply not grown with the demand. The prosecutor's office has gone from, in the last, I think, 20 years, 4 or 5 attorneys to 6 or 7 now. So, and our criminal caseload in terms of misdemeanors is higher than theirs. So.
And one further following question, is this, so I wasn't obviously on the council last year, is this a request that you make every year and you don't get?
This is a request that I have made since I came here, yes, since I was appointed as city attorney, to either have a half-time or a full-time attorney, but certainly a full-time attorney is the best option for us. And we had to do last year is you allocated, I think, $6,600 in contract monies, and we had to actually go out and hire contract people to help keep the work up. And that's just not an adequate way to try and run the office. There's not always contract people available. And it's every time somebody comes in, you have to train them in what you're doing in the office. So it's very time consuming. It's not an efficient use of the money. So of the money that's available for that, certainly that $6,600 or the majority, it would come back to help fund this position.
So in this current budget, I said we don't actually see the breakdown. Have you budgeted for an attorney, but we also have on top of that contracted services budget?
No,
too?
I think what Mr. Marsh did was he took the contract money out and reduced what shows for the budget, what's needed for the budget for a full-time attorney by the amount of that contract. But you can check with him. So.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Randall.
Jamie, isn't it also true that, last year or year before last, we took on some more responsibilities as far as from the prosecuting attorney's office?
We did indeed. We took on the domestic violence caseload. In addition to that, as most of you are aware, we have specialty courts that they're actual courts, they're problem-solving courts, and we assign attorneys to them. Mary covers DUI court, I cover Veterans Court. The prosecutor's office covers the other 3, but those are all, it's a growing area of need of practice for us, and most of that is in our own time. Those courts, a lot of them meet either before work starts or after work starts, and so it's a volunteer basis for us to do that. But they're very, those problem-solving courts actually do what they're supposed to do. They solve problems. They keep people out of the criminal justice system that need to be kept out of it and offer them kind of a new lease on life. So there's just a substantial increase in the amount of work that we do, both civil and criminal, in the last few years.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Would having a second attorney save the city money? Besides the cost of hiring of what we're doing for private contractors, in the long run, will it save the city money through just doing a better job in your department? Is there a cost savings there, you think?
Is there a cost savings? I don't know. I don't know how to calculate that. I can tell you that we have done over the last few years what we can to reduce the costs in the office by going paperless. And we have literally emptied file cabinets because we're paperless now. Our cost for paper and computing supplies is way down. I think I said this once before. My legal secretary, Donna Waldron, went almost a year with one printer cartridge. That's almost unheard of in an office like ours. But because we went paperless, we've been able to cut those costs back. And that's, I think, a substantial savings that would help to offset some of the cost of the attorney, although it doesn't show up in that same category, obviously, because personnel is budgeted one place and the cost of non-personnel items is budgeted another. But
I guess what my question really is or what I want to get to is, because apparently, your workload is there's a lot of stuff on your platter. And I have not spent a lot of time in court personally, so outside of watching it on TV. And is there at times where, because of your workload, it's just easier in some cases to take the path of least resistance, which might be a plea bargain or something, because we need to move on to other issues? If we had an additional attorney, the city may be able to recapture costs and spend some time on cases that probably need more attention but don't get it because there's just so much time and so much you.
I don't think that our caseload is what suffers. I think what suffers are all the other departments that need our assistance. And I said, you can ask them. It's a rare evening that I don't take work home. And I certainly would like to not have to do that almost every night. And having another attorney would allow us to get some of those things done during the daytime that we're taking home at night. We're on salary, so we're expected to do the job until the job's done. And we're very conscientious about what we do. So I would say, no, we don't plead cases out that we shouldn't plead out. And we've been very conscientious in handling all the civil litigation that's gone on, that's been assigned to us. I think we're right now, with the exception of the lawsuit that was just filed, at an all-time low in terms of pending litigation against the city, because we've been able to resolve all those issues. So,
thank you, Jamie.
Councilor Collins.
I just have a quick question in the other capital improvements section of the Citizen Guide, and I apologize if this was answered at a work session or one of our other meetings. On information systems, it has the replacement program at $230,000 for this next fiscal year. That's over twice as much as what it was for this current one. And again, you have to remind me as to why it's doubled.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Marsh. A year ago, we created a separate fund for our IT department, and it's operated similar as our fleet department. What this represents is the replacement of the servers, the PCs that are, and network costs that come due next year, need to be replaced. The average cost will probably approximate more like $150,000, but because the program is so new, we really needed to fund the actual amount. Conversely, in other words, it spikes next year. Conversely, this year it was about $130,000. So you should see in FY16 and beyond, we'll get to an average funding.
So it should come back down.
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Randall.
Dan, one of my concerns too, I noticed over on page 32 of the Citizen Guide, up there in the column where it says Transportation Fund, it looks like we've lost quite a bit of money as far as budget's concerned. It goes from $6 million to $5 million down to $4 million for this proposed budget. Is there some other compensating factor that we don't know about?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, as we discussed in our work session a while back, the Transportation Fund is a very complex fund because it has everything from GIS to stormwater, street cleaning, traffic, et cetera. Without looking at the exact details, what comes to mind in FY13 that you're referring to, it's a little over $6 million and then down to 5.2, was the year we capitalized the 5th Fifth and Main work done by the URA and the First Street work. So even though that didn't come out of the city's funds, accounting-wise, we have to record it and capitalize it, which is ironically part of the nature of your amendments in this year, because the same thing happened with the roundabout, where we capitalize those monies. So if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the majority of why FY13 was higher.
Mr. Marsh, how much money were we able to get from the county regarding that bridge that they were going to build? Were we able to get the entire amount? Or what?
We still don't know, really.
Yeah, we haven't got a definitive answer. The road and bridge tax revenue that you're referring to, we have estimated somewhere between 80, I think about 80,000 is our best guess. We actually reduced the budget by 100 just to be safe, be lean and conservative on the revenue side. A lot of moving parts. One is, of course, the county's budget, and the other is it's based upon the levy rates and the assessed values in the county.
So 80,000, but we could get zero. Is that correct? It's possible that.
I've been told no, that won't happen.
100%.
Yes, if the county levies even $1, then the way the formula works, there's some portion of $1 that all the cities split within the county. Peck, Cul-de-sac, Lapway. The city of Lewiston just gets the bigger piece of that portion. So again, and I talked to the state tax commission as well, and we feel fairly cautiously optimistic that it's close to the 80,000 mark of a decline.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Blakey.
When we were in that combination city-county meeting here earlier this summer, Commissioner Tippett at that time said he thought he was comfortable in saying that we would get a six-figure number. So maybe it's 80,000 now, but he was comfortable at saying the low end of six figures when we were at that meeting.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I think that's what they were saying. You would get at least that much money in revenues, and when the 80,000 I'm referring to is a decrease from last year's monies.
Oh.
Yeah. So last year, it's say I want to say it's say let's say it was 370,000 minus the 80. So the 80 is what we'll be short, and still receive. So the difference would be what we anticipate. So 290,000. So that's clearly over the six figures. So I think that's what Commissioner Tippett was referring to, that we can be fairly confident you're going to get at least six figures.
So that number's reflected in this budget, even though we don't know 100% exactly what it'll be.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, and I think this is a good point. That's very nature by budgets themselves. They're dynamic. Manager Bennett mentioned that, we're looking for things. Well, if we approve a budget today, it change. I mean, the budget doesn't change, but it's just dynamic. And so there are just many estimates that go into putting together a budget. So, so the answer, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, councilors, I'm not against, or I'm not for a 4.8% increase. We've had a lot of discussion. There's no motion on the floor. So what are we going to do?
Well,
We still have another reading.
I believe what I was hearing from the council was you wanted to wait till the next meeting.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a motion to read the ordinance yet.
Oh, so
There was a
moved.
motion to read, and you're
Thought
in
there
the
was.
discussion part right now.
Yeah.
I didn't, who made the motion?
Blake?
Okay.
Right.
All right. So with that, end of discussion. All those in favor of reading ordinance 4612, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion carries 4-2.
Approving the second reading of ordinance 4612 by title only. An ordinance to be termed the annual appropriation ordinance, appropriating sums of money authorized by law and deemed necessary for all general and special municipal purposes of the city of Lewiston, Idaho, for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2014, and ending September 30th, 2015, providing for the filing of a copy of this ordinance with the Secretary of State as required by law and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Marsh?
Yes, Mr. Pro Tem, thank you. I think it's fair that we spend maybe just a minute to clarify the 4.8. This is a year of transition that we've talked about at the council level. This is the year that the legislature approved the personal property tax replacement money. That's the $100,000 property exemption businesses receive. In lieu of that, the state then is going to make us whole as best they can for that money. So the state is going to reimburse all the taxing districts the same amount of money you would have received based on last year's numbers. In our case, it was $290,000. We have approximately another $10,000 to $12,000 in the older replacement funds. So that's about $300,000 in replacement monies. That's coming from the state's general fund based on sales tax. The public really needs to know and understand, I don't think we spend enough time, that's the 1.8. Now, we're all still taxpayers of the state of Idaho and the United States government, et cetera, and so I get that. So what that leaves is the 3%. It's 3% that this budget includes for a property tax increase. Because of the math, and to be as transparent and as conservative as possible, we are presenting 4.8. That's the best advice that's been given by the state and the county. But without question, it's 3%, and it's on page 4 of your Citizens Guide. It's clearly outlined. It's $484,000. 3%, we get new construction, which is a bonus, if you will, for new construction of $164,000, and $290,000, actually it's $300,000 with the, is the 1.8. The math equals 4.8. Okay? So some say you're doing yourself a disservice. We're just trying to be as transparent as possible, and it doesn't make light of the 3% that still gets requested. Doesn't mean we'll land there, but the math is where you get the 4.8%. And one last thing I want to add on the budget, we've talked about what we can shave or this and there. The city needs at this point now about 0.5%, 0.5%, which is about $80,000 to balance. Council's been presented with a la carte, 7 or 8 items, city attorney help, parks assistance, new roads. Those are all options we can pick and choose and do none of them and say, let's don't do any of them. We're at 0.5%. So I just wanted to take a minute to kind of put all that in some perspective.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Ordinance 4611, fixing and establishing the tax certification on all taxable properties situate within the corporate limits of the city for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2014 and ending September 30th, 2015, for the purpose of providing and raising monies for municipal and corporate purposes, providing for the tax certification to the Nez Perce County Commissioners in the amount of $7,110,000.930. I'd entertain a motion to read Ordinance 4611.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Randall.
Mr. Bennett, could you expound on what time limit we have on getting our budget request over to the county as far as taxes? We have a time limit that we're supposed to meet.
September, it's the first Thursday. It's like September 4th.
Okay. The reason we have the 3 budget meetings in August is so that we can have the 3 readings of the ordinances that are required and any resolutions are approved prior to the end of the month of August, so that we can turn those in to the county. And as Mr. Marsh informed me, it's this year, I think it falls around the 4th of September. So it gives us 10 days or so after final action is taken on the budget to get the paperwork, the forms filled out and put together and have that submitted to the county. Since this particular item has to do with the tax certification, just one comment I would like to make, because we've heard this a couple of times now about the effect of increasing the budget by, say, 4.8%, and what that does to the average tax bill. The calculations that we have used has been $1 a month, or a $12 annual increase to the first $100,000 of taxable assessed value. Others have said, now, wait a minute, my bill went up much more than that last year. That can't possibly be right. Well, it can. And the reason is because there's a difference between the amount that the city levies for its property tax increase and the amount of the assessed value for properties, which is done by the county assessor's office. So you could theoretically have a 0% tax increase. You could vote for zero, nothing. And that wouldn't have any effect on whether many properties went up in tax value or down in tax value, because that is established by the county assessor's office. So a property could very considerably go up in value and their taxes would increase even though the council had not increased the taxes at all. So it's important to keep that distinction. What we're talking about is what's the incremental value of an increase in the percentage of the tax levy levied by the city on the first $100,000 of assessed value. And so the calculations that we've come up with are the correct ones. What factors that we have that are not in our control is how much the assessed value of individual properties actually increases or decreases. So both parties are right. When Mr. Kluss comes up and says, my bill went way up, I'm sure that it did. But the reason that it went up is the important issue. It's not because of the tax levy that the city levied last year. Last year was pennies on the first $100,000 of assessed value. It was because of the valuation placed on an individual property by the tax assessor. And there are a lot of things that go into that. The overall tax assessment and economic condition of the city. What happens in your particular neighborhood, where a bunch of houses sold at higher values, raising everyone's property taxes. Did your particular property have a number of improvements done to it that raised its assessed value? There are a lot of factors that the county assessor has to take into consideration in determining what the assessed value of properties is. Once that's done, the impact is then compounded by whatever the city does as far as the way it levies its property tax. So when we say 4.8% would result in a $1 a month increase, that would be correct. If we were to say a 3% tax increase would result in a $5 a year annual decrease in property taxes, that's also correct. But those numbers are so small that they are dwarfed often by what the impact is on property assessed values by the value that's placed on them by the county tax assessor. So it's just important to keep those distinctions in mind when we're talking about what the impact is of the city's allocation of its property taxes.
Councilor Randall.
Dan, isn't it also true on the property tax value of each year that can be affected by the state of Idaho's changing the exemption rate, because it's not stable? It doesn't stay one level all the time. It can go up and down. And does a circuit breaker do that kind of thing? Do you know if it varies from year to year?
I don't.
I'm not positive on that. The circuit breaker for the low income,
Yeah.
I imagine it's tied to inflation as far as those qualified limits and levels.
But I do know the exemption can vary,
Yes.
because they take a look at, state of Iowa takes mainly a look at southern Idaho values and then adjusts accordingly, but
Yes, in fact, this year it increased from 81,000 to approximately 84 for the homeowners exemption.
thank you.
Counselor Blakey.
At the tail end of last week's meeting, last week, I asked all of you to consider going home and doing the calculations on your own taxes and see what the different rate changes would do to your own personal situations. And don't know if any of you did it or not, but I did myself. And I sat down with a couple of my coworkers. And again, is exactly what Mr. Bennett was saying. It all hinges on, so much of it hinges on the appraisal of your property. I happen to live in a neighborhood that isn't going in the right direction, I guess. And my house, I grew $2,000 in value last year. On a $200,000 appraisal, I gained a couple $1,000s. I wish my house had appreciated a lot more than that, frankly. I'd rather have $10,000 of appreciation and maybe $200 or $300 more in property taxes, but that's not what I got. What I got was a couple $1,000s of appreciation, maybe if I'm lucky, and I got a couple houses down the street from me that are going the wrong way. They're probably not helping my property values at all in my neighborhood at this point in time. One of my coworkers, like Mr. Kluss, will experience, we did his calculations, and he's going to experience about a $4.50 a month increase. We went and looked at the value of his property. He also picked up almost approximately close to $15,000 of appraisal value, growth in the value of his property. He's very happy. He's not happy he's got to pay more money. No one's happy about that, both on the city side and the county side. You know, the county's going to raise it 3% too. So you're getting it twice, not just once, twice, throwing what Ken Cron talked about, and there's other fees. But on the other side, my coworker, he is seeing the value of his property going up, and ultimately, as owners of property, you want to see the value of your investments go up. You don't want to see the value of your investments go down just to lower your taxes. At least I'm not trying to do that purposely, and I don't think anybody's trying to do that purposely. So it's a double-edged sword, exactly like you said. My situation, mine will go up $1.75 a month based on the appreciation. $1.74 a month is what, based on a 4.8%, I go up $1.74 a month, my property. A coworker, it's $4 and something. His home appreciated more than my house appreciated. I guess I need to change neighborhoods maybe.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of reading ordinance 4611, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion carries 4-2.
Approving the second reading of ordinance 4611 by title only, an ordinance fixing and establishing the tax certification on all taxable properties situate within the corporate limits of the city of Lewiston for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2014 and ending September 30th, 2015, for the purpose of providing and raising monies for municipal and corporate purposes, providing for the tax certification to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, in the dollar amount of $17,110,930, providing a certified copy of the annual appropriation ordinance to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, and adopted by the City of Lewiston for the 2014-2015 fiscal year and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished and new business. Councilor Blakey.
Is it appropriate for me to ask a question right now, a general question or not?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Let's say that vote went this is a question for possibly all three, Jim, Dan, or Jamie. Let's say that vote went the other way. It was 4-2 not to read this. Or if the prior active agenda went 4-2 the other way. Is it conceivable that the city council could shut down the city government come October 1st if we were not to have an approved budget or a working budget by the time that we have to submit it to the county? Could we conceivably shut the government down?
Yes, but to answer your question, on this particular motions, since we're talking about the second reading of the ordinance, if the motion had failed we simply would have rescheduled it for the next meeting and had both the second reading and the third reading at the next meeting.
But if we were to vote against them again at that point in time, would we then be approaching something like the federal government does periodically?
Or defer to the city attorney.
You would be spending reserves
Oh.
and cutting services at that point.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to pass a budget, or indeed, you shut the city down. And there are certain things that you're just not allowed to do. So, I mean, you either would be faced with the Detroit option of going in bankruptcy, or continuing to try to pass a budget that was acceptable. So either cutting services or working through a budget that's acceptable.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Counselor Daniel.
I think if there was a 4-2 vote the other way, the 4 would be coming up with an idea of what they'd want the budget to look like. I guess.
Fair enough.
Are there any city councilor comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to city manager comments. Mr. Bennett.
No, I don't really, oh, wait a minute, yes, I do have a comment I want to make. Actually, this is one of the times when it's a real pleasure for me to address the council on a personnel issue as opposed to, dealing with things like the budget. Pursuant to city code, the city manager is empowered to hire employees for the city of Lewiston, with the exception that when that hire is a department head, it comes before the city council for approval. Previously, I've already had an opportunity to speak with each of you at some length on this subject, and I have made a announcement earlier last week that it is my pleasure to recommend that the City of Lewiston hire our current Division Chief and Interim Fire Chief, Travis Michaelbust, as the Fire Chief for the City of Lewiston. As I said earlier in my statement, I've known Travis and worked with him closely for the last 3+ years since I've been here. Watched him as he learned under the tutelage of Chief DeYoung, and I've become extremely impressed with his poise and with his understanding of fire operations, his rapport with the members of the department. The feedback that I've gotten from the community has been extremely positive with regard to Chief Michaelbust. And I think that his appointment as the fire chief for the city of Lewiston would not only be the right move to make at this time, but will provide the city with a strong leadership for many years to come. Chief Michaelbust is a longtime City of Lewiston resident, longtime member of the department. I think it would be fair to say that this is something that Travis has been working toward all of his life. And so, again, it's with my great pleasure to recommend to the City Council that Travis Michaelbust be appointed as the Fire Chief for the City of Lewiston.
If it's the appropriate time, then I'll entertain a motion to confirm Interim Chief Michaelbust to full-time or official Fire Chief Michaelbust.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Randall.
I've known Travis for quite a few years. In fact, I knew him back when he was a probationary firefighter. So, but I don't think that'll have a bearing on my decision on that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor to affirm Chief Michaelbust, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
With the council's indulgence, I'd like to invite Chief Michaelbust up to the podium for a moment to make a few comments.
Absolutely. Chief Michaelbust.
This might be one of the few times that I'm actually without a lot of words. I'm honored and pleasured to be the next fire chief. I work in an amazing community. I love this community. I love the members of the department. And I look forward to making sure that the citizens here are taken care of, that they're safe, and that we do the right thing. Being the interim, I've looked, I have something written on my board in my office that for every decision that's made, I make sure that the impact it has on accomplishing our mission of helping people, the mission and taking care of our customers, the wonderful citizens, and the members of the department. And, every time we make a decision, we think of that. But I'm just honored. This has been a goal of mine. I have my wonderful family sitting up here, my lovely wife and my daughter, Abby. We're a part of this community. We love it here. My son, he lives in LA now, so he's gone on to bigger things with school. And my parents, Tom and Dixie, traveled down, and I greatly appreciate it. They can vouch that since I was about 3 or 4 years old, this was my goal. But it's just an honor and a pleasure to serve you and to serve the citizens of Lewiston. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be Lewiston's next chief.
Thank you, Chief. Next item on the agenda is advisory board and commission appointments. Do we have any?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Collins.
On behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Jacqueline Height as a member. She is renewing her membership with this committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded to approve Jacqueline Height to the Historic Commission. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Collins.
We have also had a recent resignation within this commission, and we are looking for somebody to fill that spot.
Thank you. I believe there's also an opening on the Transportation Advisory Commission due to Garrett Fry's resignation. We're still looking for someone to fill that role. Do we have any other advisory board and commission appointments? Councilor Randall.
We have 2 on the solid waste.
Okay. Councilor Maldonado.
There are 2 openings on the Youth Advisory Commission and an opening still on the Library Board that we are looking for somebody to apply for.
Thank you. Anything else? Councilor Collins.
What is, Jesse, what's the age group you're looking at on that youth advisory?
8th grade to 12th grade.
8th grade through?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is work session agenda topics. Do we have any work session agenda topics? Hearing none, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.